Frank Shabila.
No.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sabrina Lee. I live in Keene, New Hampshire. I'm a documentary filmmaking. Excuse me.
Yes.
I speak in gerunds. Everything must end in ing. I am documentary filmmaking. No, I'm a documentary filmmaker. And I had the opportunity to do this panel last year, and I loved it. I love talking about short films because I think it's such a cool medium. I've always worked in the longer format, so to talk to people who have found a way to tell a story in 40 minutes or less is really fascinating to me. I want to start off by thanking Diana Costello for putting on an amazing film festival again this year. I hope all of you are going to be checking out as many films as you can tomorrow. The lineup is just fantastic. We have how many more films than we did last year, Diana? 11 more, yeah. So she, in addition to being brilliant, she's also ambitious. So thank you. And part of what makes this festival great too is Keene is a great town, and because it's such a well-run festival, we have the ability to entice the filmmakers to come join us. Some of them are from New Hampshire, some of them are coming from, are international, coming from Canada. Our great white neighbor to the north, exactly. So again, it's great to have all of you here, and I loved each and every one of your projects. They were a pleasure to watch, and I'm excited to talk about them. And on that note, from my standpoint, the best panel is one where the moderator speaks the least. So I'm hoping you all will feel comfortable engaging with each other and not feeling like I have to lead all the questions. And at the end, we will take questions from the audience. So if you have something you want to ask a particular filmmaker that hasn't been answered, you'll definitely get your chance at the end. So I thought maybe we would start off, if everybody could just introduce themselves, let us know what your project is, what your role was on the project, and if this is your first film. And then also, I thought it'd be, so we can identify everybody, just a quick, fun, otherwise unknown fact about you that's maybe unrelated to film.
All right.
Everybody has longer to think about
Yeah, I know,
this.
right?
That way you don't dwell on the other part of the answer. Okay.
I'm Robert Gray, or R.W. Gray. I'm the director of my husband's Jump. I think it's my 8th film. And at the age of 4, I was almost eaten by a cougar.
Wow.
Oh, I can't top that.
He's only done 7 films.
I'm John Dewar. I was the producer and editor on the short film My Husband's Jump, so I was working with Rob on that project. It is our company, Frictive Pictures. It was our 12th short film. We made a box set of Blu-rays recently, and we decided to finally count them all. I think it's number 12, is it? Okay. Number 12, little known fact about me, when I was in high school, I wanted to be a pro wrestler, and my name was JD Danger.
Oh my gosh.
Also, one of the most embarrassing things about me, too. So.
I have videos of this.
I'm Lena Barakat. I was the writer, director, producer for Glowworm, which is a short film, and also the B movie, which plays tomorrow in the 145 block. This was my first film as a director. I produced feature films and short films for the past 10 years, but this was my diving out into directing, and since then I've made many more shorts and a feature. So it was fun, it stuck. And a little known fact about me, speaking of 4 years old, I was in a body cast for 6 weeks when I was 3.5, almost 4 years old.
My name's Mark Bellacci. I'm a co-director of Texture. This is the first film that I've directed outside of film school. We have a little company called Dozy Dose Productions. And little known fact about me, I'm told I'm a distant relative of the guy who played Jethro on the Beverly Hillbillies.
Nice.
Which I choose to believe.
Yeah, definitely.
Hi there, I'm Eric Stern. I'm the co-writer, producer, and director of Texture. Little known fact. I was a wedding singer before
I like that.
my career as an attorney and now filmmaker.
That's the best of them all.
Great. So I think the question probably most of us have is, when you get an idea for a film, how do you know that this film is destined to be a short film? Or do you know? At what point does that decision get made. All three of these films are narrative, so they're accompanying a script, I guess. So the script is driving the length of it. But when it's originally conceived of, what's the process for making that determination? We can start off with you.
Sure. My Husband's Jump is based on a Newfoundland short story by a writer named Jessica Grant. Thank you. A wonderful writer if you get a chance to read her work. I honestly think, because we're adapting one of my short stories into a feature film this summer, and we adapted another one of my short stories into a film recently. And honestly, I feel like we seem to choose stories that everybody says, oh, that could never be a film. It's more about kind of trying to take something far too large and condense it into a crucible of a story. It seems to be the challenge, or what's alluring. I told you, when you made My Husband's Jump, which screened here last year.
Beautifully Drowned.
My Beautifully Drowned. My Beautifully Drowned. Oh my God. The Beautifully
It's
Drowned.
contagious. Sorry.
You started this. I told him it was unfilmable, and that's when he made that film. So,
Which was beautifully filmed and beautifully done, by the way. And thank you for coming back to see us.
Yes, and he did prove me wrong, yes. So I don't know, for me, there's something in choosing the story which must seem like it seems a little impossible to actually go about it, I think.
That makes it right for a short film? Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying? Okay.
Yeah. Which is, by the way, I'm also a screenwriting professor, and that is everything I tell my students not to do, just so we're clear on that. So.
For me, it takes a while. Sometimes I'll find projects, maybe short stories or something that someone pitches to me, and it'll have an initial spark, but then sometimes it fades out really quickly. For me, it takes a really long time. It's almost sometimes where it almost grows on you in a way, or it seems to over time, like the idea and some of the images that come from reading the story or that come with the idea just start to grow and kind of take over, and you find yourself thinking about them constantly. And then again, as I said, there's some that totally just disappear from thoughts after they're initially pitched to you. So me, it's something I have to sit with for a while and really think about what it is that's drawing me to it and why this is a story I feel I want to tell. Like sometimes it can take me a long time to write a project, or I'll ditch a few projects in the middle of writing because it may not have that kind of continuous spark for me. So I've got to sit with it for a while, and it almost acts as a parasite in my brain and won't leave until I actually do something with it.
I just have a question. So how long is a long time? Like what's from when you first came upon this amazing short story to today? How much time has passed?
We take a long time because we put a lot of time into scripts.
Okay. So.
I think if you're okay with me saying that,
Go for it.
Beautifully Drowned was how many drafts?
It was Beautifully Drowned. I was looking at it a couple months ago, and I think we had something like 36 drafts of it.
And My Husband's Jump had to be in the mid-20s in terms of drafts, and so that's years of script development.
So was it like 3 years between the time you encountered the story and we're sitting here today, or?
So by way of saying, everybody go find this short story. It's in a book called
Something about grieving.
Something of Loss. Okay, I forgot the title. Jessica Grant.
So it's a treasure hunt. If you can find it.
It's a treasure hunt.
Anyway,
Well
it's the same title for the short story, and it is. I'm also an English professor, and amongst English professors that I know, this is like a coveted short story. It's one that we're all in love with, and I think if you haven't seen the film, if you read the story, you'll see why we're in love with it. And it had haunted me for a decade. And then I had a grad student say she wanted to adapt it, and she just wrote to the publisher and got the rights, and so it just started to snowball from there. So, but I think the stories have to haunt you a bit. I mean, I think particularly when you're talking to filmmakers that are first starting out, it's like, this is going to be a 2 or 3 year process for you. You better love the damn thing you're gonna do. So, yeah. So.
Go ahead, Lena.
So that sounds like a really smart way to go about script development and sitting with pieces. I'm kind of on the opposite spectrum. So rather than me saying, okay, well, this is the idea I have, this is the story, let me see if it's a short, let me see if it's a feature. because I came first from producing, I think very practically in everything that I do with film. So it's, what do I want to make? I want to make a short, I want to make a feature, and either I'm going to write a script myself or I'll develop somebody else's. And as a filmmaker, and I'm sure we'll probably get to this at some point, like making a short is, there are filmmakers who that is what they're really good at, and that is the only thing that they want to do, because it's a separate art form than making features. It really is a specific skill set as far as writing goes. But there's not a lot you can do with a short film as far as distribution and money and sustainability. So for a lot of us filmmakers, making a short is sort of an experiment, or it's an opportunity to try things out or to gather a team. For me, it was a chance to get in the directing position and see if that worked. But features are really what I'm always gunning for, because for similar amounts of resources, you can make something that can go so much farther. So for my first 3 short films, Glowworm being the first of which, I specifically went out wanting to make a short film, because it was sort of like, let's try this, let's try that, let's try this. And I've got a short film that I'm shooting in May. That's because it was, it's part of a bigger project. I'm one of 8 films, and they wanted a short film, so I'm doing it. But otherwise, my focus now is pretty much, hopefully, going to focus on the feature film world, because that's something that can really advance my career. And my turnover, like Glowworm, I decided in December I wanted to make a short film, and we had nothing. I mean, December 1st, absolutely nothing, and by January 4th, we were filming Glowworm. So the script, everything came together in that month time. Not that that's great, I'm not, like, at all. I mean, 36 drafts, awesome. You know what I mean? Like, mine do not go through that many drafts. So I'm not really the best model for that, because the turnaround time is really short, but it's always been a really practical thing for me. Is just like, what are my resources? Who do I have to work with? What property can I use? And like throw that together, and the creative inspiration comes as a byproduct of the tools that I have to work with.
Okay, I have a follow-up question to that. Since you're used to the longer format, how long is the film right now? With
Glowworm, it's 25 minutes.
Okay, so what was usually the rough cut is significantly longer. What was the long, or not in your case?
Good question. I think it was 30 minutes. I think the first one was 30 minutes, yeah.
Okay, so about 20% longer than it is now, okay.
Yeah, but like, for example, Things We Say, which is another short that Bob executive produced, I think our first cut was almost 40 minutes, and it went down to 28. No, it's under 30. I know that. It's definitely, I think it's 28 something. Okay. So I've 24. There we go. There. So it'll, I've definitely had longer. It can go from longer and down to shorter. A feature film that a bunch of people who are in the room right now helped make, Only Daughter. We ended up using every single thing that we filmed except for like a tiny little sliver, because we repurposed it and used in other places. So like the first cut was like, 5 minutes off from what the final cut was. So oftentimes it's a lot longer and it comes down, but it kind of depends on like how well you've planned and that kind of thing.
But or in this case, it sounds like there wasn't a ton of planning, but sometimes the film ends up being as long as it wants to be.
Yeah.
That's a consulting producer I used to work with used to say that when you would say, how long will the film be? He would say, as long as it wants to be.
I love that.
So, yeah.
Great.
Okay.
I just wanted to piggyback off of what Lena said about the practical side.
Yeah.
For us, though she wasn't introduced, my wife Marguerite Corvini is in the audience, and she was the original writer of Texture. From the very beginning, we wanted to do something which we could film quickly. Because we have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and jobs on the side. So it was like we knew we were going to be able to put a lot more into post than the actual photography. Sure. So we shot it over one evening at a restaurant in Portsmouth. It was 6 hours on the shortest evening of the year, as it turned out, in June of 2016.
Done by the time light came.
Yeah, so we were limited to darkness when we were shooting it. And so we just made the decisions pretty much based off of that. And the subject matter for Texture was kind of perfect for a short, because it was kind of like testing the waters to see if it would work as a feature someday, and just kind of gauge the reactions that we were getting from it. So I think that our subject matter was kind of perfect for a short from the start.
Also, we were talking earlier today about how all of us grew up with The Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
And there were hour-long episodes of The Twilight Zone, and nobody remembers them, but everybody remembers the half-hour ones that were nice and tight and short. And that's how I always look at a story. Even the feature films that I like, I always wonder, well, you could have cut a half hour out of that. You know what I mean? So I just always see what the smallest amount could be.
I just want to add, with another short of mine, Things We Say, the one I said was 40 minutes originally. Like, there was a moment where I was like, maybe we should reshoot some more material. Like, let's just make it a feature, we're so close. And then it was like, no, you need to cut like a lot out of it, So it was good, like,
So one of the things I find remarkable about these three films is the things they have in common are really that they're short films and they're narrative. But beyond that, from a personality standpoint, they could not be more different. And one of the things that I will say about each of them is they all had a remarkably strong vibe. The film sits with you in a very specific way afterwards. And I guess I'm curious, from an artistic standpoint, when you set out to make the film, were you aware of what the vibe was going to be, or was that something that emerged in the editing room or as you were directing it? Because I feel like that's what makes all these films so glorious, actually. So we'll start at this end.
Okay.
So give you some time to take it
Yeah,
out.
sure. So the original screenplay for Texture is much more dramatic. It was much more, people compared it to Black Mirror when they read it.
Yeah.
They thought it was going to be dark. And then Eric and I are kind of ridiculous when we get together, just naturally. We cast 3 actors who were just really funny. When we were on set, we kept it light and we kept it really fun set, and everything started to turn into a comedic way. And then when we started editing it, there were times where, if you haven't seen it, it's about 2 people in the future who are on a first date, but they can't talk, they only text to each other. Well, when we start telling people that concept would make them laugh. And we're like, oh, okay, well, you're gonna laugh at the very first scene. And then we had these long moments where we didn't have anything scripted. We had the waiter doing something, and we were like, well, we need to have them texting something. So what would they text? So we just came up with the stupidest stuff. And just, it went from a dark, futuristic talk about technology to kind of a ridiculous comedy.
Interesting.
Okay, so that answer surprised me, and I'm so happy that you shared that with
Yeah,
us.
I'm
That's
glad
really
you
cool
asked
for us to
that.
have seen it. You want to add anything to that, Eric? Or?
I don't have a whole lot to add to that. I mean, I think that we never really intended for it to be dark per se, but there were certain types of films that we all like different types of films, but one film that we could come back to was Back to the Future. We all loved it. And it was something that spoke to us. And so there were certain homages that we did place in the film when we shot it from that perspective. But yeah, as far as the vibe of it, like, that is kind of what we were going for. At the end, like, we wanted something to be positive, to take a positive message away from it, because there is definitely a lot of, and I think for good reason, doom and gloom with regards to technology, but it's not all bad. And I think that, what we were trying to show is that there's a soul to what's going on today. It's not going to get as bad as you think.
Yes, it was intentional from the beginning. When I have a co-writer on Glowworm, Brandon, a friend of mine, when we were setting out to write Glowworm, the things that we knew were that we wanted my younger sister Emma, who plays Emma. I had her. I wanted to work with Pedro, who plays Pedro, and I wanted it to feature Winter. Winter, I wanted to be a character in the film, because shooting in the snow is a challenge. It's not fun. It's not easy. But if you have a property like the one that we have, it's manageable. On a very small budget, it's still manageable. And so I wanted to feature it because we could. We were filming in January, so why not? Like, we're in New Hampshire in January. Snow is a very present thing. Although, ironically, we had no snow the whole week before. We almost had no snow for the film. It was a near disaster. But so I knew that Winter, we wanted to be a presence in everything, from visually, obviously, to the sounds of the snow, to all that kind of thing. And then, a lot of it goes into discussions on the color correction and that kind of thing. So that vision was there, but I have to say a lot of the tone was created with the score. And while Wes Aldrich, who is the frontman for Hug the Dog, he did the whole score for Glowworm, an incredible job. While I gave him notes of things that I liked, like moody electric guitar, and I had I always wanted one natural instrument in with synthetic things. Like I had some guidelines, but really like he created that all on his own, and that is so much of the tone and the vibe of the film, and that's on him. So I'd say it's a mix of before and then what he brought to it after.
Yeah, I agree with the music was really effective. When you worked with the composer, did he watch the film and then compose? So he
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if he had created anything in advance. No, I don't think anything was. I think he watched the whole thing first and then went from there. Sometimes I'll work with I've many times worked with composers who will read the script and will begin the process before I even film. So that's common too. But for this, I'm pretty sure I gave him the whole film, or at least a rough cut. He had a rough cut of it before he started creating.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
So I guess in terms of trying to find the vibe or the mood for the film, I'll answer that is the editor on this project, because for me I find the way I approach editing, for me it's about finding what the mood of the entire film is, and sometimes that's difficult, where there might be one scene I edit and I really like the way that scene plays, but then when I then watch the entire context of the film, like watch the whole film together, it's like, okay, now that scene isn't jiving with the entire mood of the film, or it's almost distracting from what we wanted to do overall. So for me, when I'm editing, I find pacing becomes such an important factor about finding that kind of, especially in a short film, finding what that consistent pace is throughout, because so much of that can set the mood for the film. So it's tough jumping back and forth, where it's like you're looking at individual shots, like small cuts and these scenes, but sometimes they don't fit the overall bigger picture. So, when you think when you're editing, it's like, okay, I have to go in today and I just have to fix this one scene or something. And then it's like, no, you're actually fixing the entire film. Mm-hmm. You're working on the whole piece together, and how it all jives to create that overall mood in the end. Because if one scene falls apart or distracts from that mood or vibe in some way, then, the whole film will suffer for it.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you that haven't seen My Husband's Jump, it's about a woman who, her husband's an Olympic ski jumper who, the jumpers who go down and go flying up in the air. He goes up and never comes down. And then everybody begins to interrogate this woman and pull her into the spotlight to try to understand this event. From the moment we thought about shooting the story, it occurred to us that it had to be in a very controlled world. And that was, as you might have seen in the aesthetics, more of a 1950s world, because at the core of it, I believed it was a story about wonder. And I feel like we're a little wonder challenged nowadays, when if this happened at the last Olympics, everybody would have had a smartphone and they would have all had evidence, and it would have been the end of it. So we wanted an era where wonder was still possible. And so the 50s aesthetic, which is kind of creates a really enclosed environment with the film, was very important. We then also aesthetically wanted to pump up the colors and everything and make it very storybook. I think every film we make, and every film anybody makes, you want to invite people into the dream of the story. With this one, we really wanted the dreaminess, basically. If you've seen it, there's a scene where she gets so angry. She, when you have somebody die in your life, people bring you casseroles. And somebody brings her a casserole, and she gets so angry in one scene of the film that she throws this casserole, like with everything she's got. And we actually had to do an extra shoot night where we shot the casserole landing on the concrete and try different types of pasta.
I was going to say, how many casseroles did you go through just to get the right shot?
We prepped for 20 casseroles.
Wow.
I think we got pretty lucky and we only used 3 or 4, didn't we?
Wow.
And then was the crew eating casserole for the next?
We had some interns on the shoot, so I think maybe
it
we
was
left
the
it with them.
nastiest pasta ever made.
Yeah, so give it to the interns, right?
But the thing that we discovered in what we were always trying to do was never get too real. And actually, every piece of footage we had of the casserole crashing onto the concrete became so real, you were kicked out of the story.
That's so interesting.
And so, if you've seen the film,
It broke the spell.
the casserole never lands in the film.
Right. Yeah, but I can see what you're talking
Yeah.
about. This the spell is broken.
Yeah, and so
you have to re-enter.
it became a really nice moment of like, I mean, it was horrible for our crew who had to go shoot 4 hours of pasta throwing, but it never ended up in the film. But it was this really, these moments where you are aware of the integrity of the story and how you need to protect it. And yeah. And one more little side note about the casserole. She's wearing this beautiful dress in that scene. It was torn down the side. Thank God it was the last scene we did with that dress, because just ripped, because she just gave it, that casserole.
Wow.
And now it hangs in my office and just creates a lot of confusion why there's a dress hanging in my office. But
This torn dress hanging in your office.
yeah, it's a beautiful dress, though.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
That's a great story. I guess my next question is for Lena. You said this is your first time directing a film, and I just want to. Sometimes when people are a first-time director, they're also a first-time filmmaker. But it sounds like you've had every other role on this.
Some other real
So can you tell us a little bit about what is different about being in the director's seat?
Sure. So I pretty much, I mean, for the most part, producing at various levels has been what I've done. I've done art direction, I've done music supervision, a little bit of AD work, but mostly production. And what's great about producing is that you really own the content. That's why I was drawn to it. From start to finish, you're there from the day that the script is picked or commissioned to be written, or you write the script. You know, you're there from day one all the way till, you know, the end of festivals, and it's under the theaters, and, you know, if you're lucky, you're the one at the Oscars getting the Best Picture award, not the director. You know, you get the glory because you put in all that time and all the tears and everything else that comes with it. So producing is a creative job, but it's a lot of just management and oversight and putting all the pieces together. You get to be extremely creative as well, and you get to work hands-on with the creatives that you hire, but you are really managing a lot of things. Directing, it's different because everything I've directed, I've also been a producer on, or the lead producer. My feature, fortunately, I've been able to step back a bit, and I have two really great producers who have been able to take over a bit of that. But so I've never had just a director role where I can kind of turn off the rest. But when I'm directing, I really do try to turn off all of the rest and not think about the practical, not think about the clock or the budget, which is really, really challenging as a producer to forget. But you can really just focus on the creative. And so if you're a director and just a director, you'll be brought in when there's already a script. There may even be some other factors in place already, but then you help with the casting, you help choose the DP, you help make the decisions with the producers that shape what visually you're going to see on the page. And then once it's done, the director gets to make their cut of the film with the editor, and then oftentimes the director will leave and the producers will do their cut of the film, which is why you have the director's cut versus the producer's cut, which is what's actually in the movies. With independent films, there's usually no difference, but for bigger Hollywood things, the director's kind of just there to have this beautiful creative moment, and then that's it, really. So on the one hand, being a producer, you get all this control. You choose the director because you know the vision you want to see, and you know that this man or woman is going to be able to get that on the screen for you and get that out of the actors. As the director, you're hyper focused on the creative. You get to really sink into the moments, which is a challenge in its own way. It's a lot of pressure, but that's it. You don't really get to see it start to finish. So as far as me, I mean, I'm naturally suited to the producing role. I like it. It's just it's my personality type. But I will tell you, I've never enjoyed being on set as much as I have as a director. I would laugh, I love making movies and I would love the pre-production so much, but as a producer, once we hit production, I hated making movies. I'd be like, why am I doing this? What have I got? I forgot I hate being on set. I would hate it, And then I get through and you forget, and it's like childbirth, and it's maybe I'll have another baby, you forget, but as a director, day one, on set directing, and it's this I could do forever. It's a different thing that I find really rewarding.
Yeah, and I'm curious for you, Rob, you directed and produced the film. Did you find yourself more in the director's role? Because I definitely identify with what she said about the pull between, as a producer, you're responsible for the budget, but when you're you have your director's hat on, you want to just be entirely focused on the artistic vision and so you want to segregate those two things, those two personalities as much as possible. But from a practical standpoint, it's hard to do. Did you?
The two of us have a production company with a third guy named Matt Rogers, and the whole purpose of creating it was to shoulder the weight, basically. So that when I did produce, but we actually always have the goal that at a certain point, I take off all the other hats and I'm just directing until John inevitably at some point the shoot comes in and yells at me because I've done something wrong. But Beautifully Drowned, which was here last summer, I produced. It almost drowned in the Bay of Fundy producing, and we take turns that way.
Okay.
And I don't know how. Now that we do it that way, I don't know how anybody does it any other way, because you do need this concentration as a director to really see the whole thing. And if you're worried about whether the pasta's ready, you know, you're not
exactly.
gonna be. So.
Yeah.
Did you want to add anything to that?
I guess with Husband's Jump, I had the opposite experience you had, where this was the first, I guess, frictive project where I was going to be the like sole lead producer on it, because Rob was directing and Matt, our other business partner, was the cinematographer on it. So they were pretty tied up, which left for the majority of it me as lead producer on the project. And it was the first time I'd had that role, like as before, where it was like the Beautifully Drowned, I was directing and producing, but wasn't like, you know, taking that producer hat off. And that's was how a lot of our projects went. And I had this interesting moment where I was going to pick up some lab props from a friend of ours who works in the science department at the local university. And I was packing it all up into my car, and she kind of asked me, she was like, so how's producing going? Do you enjoy being a producer? And I had this kind of emotional catharsis breakdown at the moment with this poor woman who was just like lending us props, and I was like spilling my heart out to her. And I was telling her, though, it's because I had spent so much time like directing, where it was like about concentration and focus and control, and producing was so much about me learning to delegate and find the right people who could do these various different jobs, and allowing other people to have this sort of control and trying to oversee everything, and having my hands in all these, you know, different roles, and trusting so many other people. And I realized that, and I told her in this moment, that producing was kind of forcing me to confront a lot of the flaws I have as a human.
So this is taking a direction I didn't expect it to. Just we're all caught off guard.
And
it was a very, very strange moment. It was a very I'm good. I've worked through it all. I spilt it all in that moment when I spoke to her, so I'm okay with talking about it now. And
but what are these flaws?
Yeah.
Tell us.
Yeah, tell us.
Giving up control, and like delegating, where I was always like, no, I'm going to do this all myself. This is all going to be me. And that sort of old, I think maybe that old school work ethic that my dad ingrained to me when I was younger. Yeah, just do everything yourself and it'll work out. And this very much, I had to get past that. And that was my emotional confession to poor Sarah in that moment, who just wanted to lend me some beakers and microscopes and go back to work. And she got a lot more than she bargained for on that trip. Yeah.
Do you guys have anything to wait? It sounds like you do a bit of the.
Well, we kind of were the do everything on the set. Both of us. But we've known each other since second grade.
Oh wow!
So it would take quite a lot for one of us to really get mad at the other one. So half the night I directed, and he was taking care of everything in the background. And then at a certain point, we switched, and he started directing, and I was making sure everyone was getting food and everything. Mm-hmm. And I think when you're doing wearing multiple hats, it's all about the preparation. Mm-hmm. And especially for this project, we had a lot of preparation. So we knew we had a tight window, and we just went in and just shot what we already had in our mind was on the film. So.
And actually, that leads me to my next question, because one of the things that one would think would be appealing about a shorter film is that predictably it would require less preparation, or you would think, but I see already people are shaking their heads. So can you continue with that thought and let us know just from a planning standpoint? And I expect your answers all to be very different because we already have a sneak peek at what Lena's going to tell us that she did this in a New York minute. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I have never been involved in the production of a feature-length film. But I would say that, I mean, absolutely everything about Texture was pre-planned. I mean, and it took a substantial time with storyboards, particularly because we were so reliant on the text balloons being properly framed. We really had no choice but to, sharpen that axe for, 4 or 5 hours before the 10 minutes that we actually had to chop the tree. In the words of Abraham Lincoln. I think that you really, every second that you prepare is going to be something that you definitely will get back manyfold when you actually are filming it. Did you want to add to that?
But at the same time, you have to leave room for when something goes wrong. In our planning, he drops his phone into his glass, which is on the counter, and we did that on one take, and because of the prop we used, it just didn't fit in the glass. And no one had thought to try that ahead of time. And so we're like, great, well, he drops in the toilet? Yes, okay, good. So you have to have a lot of plans, and then I think Francis Ford Coppola said, once you get on set, you throw them out the window and hope that they work. But
I have to say, I think the toilet works better
Yes,
than the
totally.
glass. So that was a
Yeah.
gift, actually.
Yes, it was.
Sometimes those prop malfunctions are gifts. So I'm guessing that the 6 weeks that went for Lena from when she got the idea to make, you just didn't sleep during that time?
It actually it came together fairly well. Like it's a simple story. I mean, it's about a girl. If anybody didn't see it, it's about a girl whose grandfather passes away. She inherits a farm, so she goes north to sell the farm. And while she's there, she meets a farmhand who tries to convince her not to. And it has a little bit of a supernatural element of her grandfather and that picture. But it was pretty straightforward. It was one of the easiest of all the films I've done because there's not a lot of props. Everything was on one location, It was all like, everything was sort of like up to chance of weather, and light and temperatures and that kind of thing. And like, they weren't great, but they could have been worse. So we lucked out. But I've worked with other films that are not as, complex, not as, risky of environments to film in, but like require so many different props and like so many other things so many other characters. We just had like 3 actors for this whole thing. It was very doable, fortunately. One of the most doable of anything I've ever done, which is great.
Is there anybody in the audience who's a budding filmmaker or a filmmaker? A little bit, maybe. I just think this is an interesting point that she makes, and it's something to consider when you're looking at a first project. It's like variables you can easily control, which will require less planning, fewer takes. That sometimes those are easier to,
Exactly. Small cast, very simple. Get a room, like be in a room, be in a controlled environment. I mean, we had some problems because the 101 was right out the window, so the cars driving by was a real challenge for sound, which I've learned too many times now to like be aware of because I don't think like a sound man, you know what I mean? So like, pick things that are going to make it really easy for you to succeed. Don't have something with kids. Don't have something with, explosions. Don't do anything period piece. Don't have anything with like different cultural stuff you have to deal with. Like these are all things that like increase your budget like crazy and your planning and will be major red flags if you can't pull it off. So like even if you can afford all that and you put the time in and stuff, like is somebody going to watch and be like, that does not look, So just like hedge your bets, like aim to succeed and it'll be a lot easier.
Yeah, and I think you brought up, so your film a lot of it was shot outside. Yours was entirely inside.
Yeah, you're smart.
But there are things you have to think about. I mean, we were shooting a documentary film, and it was probably the most poignant, revealing moment with a veteran who had post-traumatic stress. And as he was about to give his answer, a plane
Yeah.
and we had to ask him to pause because we knew the plane was so loud that we knew that the audio would be unusable even though we had it mic'd 6 different ways. But
Yeah.
it's like filming outside is a complication that you just, yeah.
When we filmed, we had to use as much of the darkness as possible. So we had to start when the restaurant was still in business. So when we first started the night, we didn't realize everyone's talking in that other room. You're not supposed to talk in this world. So that was fun with the sound guy to try and
Right.
black that out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the technology is definitely better for
Yeah.
that, but it's,
Yeah, it's
and then
still-
that adds to your post cost if you have
Right.
to have a sound person comb through and take
Right.
out all the bad audio. Anyway, so your
friend.
film defies Lena's
Sorry.
it was not simple.
No,
but it was- it
again,
was- it
everything
was
I tell my
expertly-
students, your advice is exactly what I say to my students. Like,
and
keep it
again-
simple.
Sure.
And then we go and do, like, when we...
But you succeeded, so that's okay.
Beautifully Drowned last summer, our schedule on the wall had we had to have tide times because we were often filming and being chased by the tide. I remember an
Think about
actor
that.
constantly going, "I'm underwater now." We had to have sunset, sunrise, and then the actors. There was 2 actors. We were only available for 2 hours every morning. Like it was just this insane. With this one, with My Husband's Jump, and you can't. I encourage you to go Google the film, and there's 4 behind-the-scenes docs, and you can see what we did because you can't really tell by watching the film. But the entire thing was shot in a space a little bit bigger than this room, with the laboratory, the ski hill, everything, all in one room with the sets. And so we had to be. Not only did we have to plan in terms of being able to fit everything into a room in terms of the sets, but if you don't have a ceiling on a room, the shots you choose are very different. Like like there's no ceiling, there was walls missing, so you had to be, your choices had to be very defined. And so we had to, we do this with most of our shoots, so a very defined shot list and usually storyboards. If you talk nice to John, he'll show you his stick figure storyboards, which are the most hideous thing you've ever seen. Only he understands them. But just a ton of planning to make sure that those things are going to work before we get there, basically. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the question about comparing short films and features in the amount of planning, like we have not learned from our mistakes at all, or we think we have. We think we have with the Beautifully Drowned. It was like, okay, we're mostly outdoors. We're at this historical settlement that has no electricity. We're on the floor of the ocean at the edge of the
toilets.
earth. There's no toilets. Okay, so the next one, let's film it all in one location, and we'll build all the sets with Husband's Jump. And so so we did that, and then we decided for the next one, for our feature film, which we begin shooting in June, we decided, okay, we'll do the same thing again. We'll keep minimal locations, and then we won't build the sets. We'll use the sets as they are. But we've decided that there'll be 52 actors in the film. So like we just keep making different we think we've learned something new, and like, okay, we'll do it differently this next time, and then we come across these other huge obstacles that we seem to like to create for ourselves. So I don't know if we're, failing upwards. Maybe we keep making these same colossal mistakes and challenges for ourselves. But that's what keeps us on our toes, I think.
When I think, I'm a documentary filmmaker, or as we talked about before, documentary filmmaking. So narrative film, I'm working with somebody has been formulating a script for a while, and one of the things I'm curious about is all of you are producing on your own. You're not your own show, basically. How do you attract talent to be a part of what you're doing? You talked about interns. Are you paying people? Are you raising money through the typical avenues that filmmakers use? Are you looking at grants? I'm looking for a little bit of a how to make a narrative film here. So whatever springs to mind.
So every time I come to a festival in the States, meet all these different filmmakers and talk about budgets and how people are able to make these films, I realize how good we have it in Canada.
I was actually afraid that this was going to be another one of those questions that leads to why Canada's better. But
So we've been there. Anyways, when I talk to people and I mention like the different funding bodies that we've been able to apply for and the funding that we've received, and it's funny. I think Dan, who I met here last year, when I was talking to him, he was like, "What do you mean the government gives you money to make a movie?" And we have lots of different opportunities that way. So that for us has been a really big avenue.
not documentaries. I mean, because there are
Yeah.
grants out there for documentary films, but there's not a whole lot of money for a narrative film, especially one that doesn't, I mean, directly hit some social justice type theme that can be promoted that way. So yeah, that's.
I was going to say, I mean, the money's one thing. I mean, money's nice, but the thing is people, right? And it's, I think having a story people are curious about even gets them on the team. I'm amazed people come out with us all the time, but I think when I see other teams from where we're at, there's people who are like divas about it, like, and just mean to people. I'm like, and one of the things, particularly our third partner who's not here, is very good at is when we're like getting really frustrated on set, going, you do realize that these people could be doing so many other things right now. They could be like spending time with their families, their loved ones. They could be watching a movie, but they're standing in the cold helping you. Like just that, I think gratitude is what keeps people coming. I'm assuming that, or either they're all masochists, but I'm assuming gratitude is, and the spirit of gratitude that I think we try to uphold, I think is one of the things that keeps our team coming back, I think. So I think that's important.
That and
The
also-
money too.
And being able to do great work. I mean, as for artists, an opportunity to work on one of your projects is probably fairly appealing, but I also know that, like you said, people have, especially in the United States, people have financial pressures where the best paying gig is not going to be to do Eric and Mark's narrative short, possibly.
Right. I was going to add to what's already been said is just keep it local as much as possible. The first production that Marguerite and I worked on was out of Los Angeles, and we were living in New Hampshire. That was logistically extremely difficult. I mean, it added a level of expense which was just not sustainable for future production. So we learned an awful lot in that production, but keeping it local. I mean, we filmed this 10 minutes from our house. So all of the help came from the Seacoast area for the most part. I mean, and it wasn't all volunteer, but there was a fair amount of that as well. So, I mean, really just keeping it local. There's a lot of talent that's in your own backyard. I would just like to go, I don't know if there'll be another opportunity to do this, but our visual effects and sound guy was someone we actually got off of Craigslist. And he was
I love this
from how far? I mean, he lived like 20 minutes away from us. He knew every single aspect of the Adobe Creative Cloud because he'd been playing with it since he was a freshman in high school.
Great.
Taught himself how to do everything.
That's a great.
And he just put in countless hours with me working on this, refining it. And it was just, we achieved so much more than we ever could have. This was Caleb Chamberlain. He's listed as the visual effects supervisor and the visual effects guy. But what a talent, and just a homegrown product, New Hampshire.
That's a great story. And I know you not only keep it local, but you keep it in your family. because
I was going to say,
you
just
passed your sister.
make your siblings do it. With my feature, I've got 3 of my sisters, both of my parents, my brother, and my 2 nephews, and my sister-in-law are all in it with that. So like,
Are they actors by trade? Or
no, well, one of the so Emma, who's in Glowworm, was going to school for acting. She graduated. She's now getting her master's in arts administration. And so I wrote Glowworm for her. I wanted to give her something that she could act in because she wants to be an actress. Nobody else in my family has any desire. I mean, they've all acted in plays, that kind of thing, but they're not pursuing that, you know? So number 1, like, make your family do it. Number 2.
But how does that work? I have to interject
Oh,
because it's
yeah.
not like you can just take anybody off the street. Or can you take anybody
No,
off the
you
street?
well, it depends. I mean, here's the thing. Like, I knew with my family, So the most important thing when I'm casting, I don't care how much experience somebody said. I work with non-actors all the time. The most important thing is, are they going to be self-aware in front of the camera? Are they going to be able to forget that there's a camera right up there that's watching all of us, Or are they just going to be able to forget that that's there? That's number one. Because if they can disconnect from that, then it's just a matter of someone getting into their mind, who they are and being themselves. So the other thing that I do is I try to cater the roles to them. So for my family, I wrote they are them, they wouldn't like to hear that. There are some negative things that are not them. They're exaggerations and they know it, but I played to their strengths and their weaknesses. I played to things that were emotional, things that were really raw. I knew that I could touch on very easily and get the responses that I needed. Emma in Glowworm, that's not her at all. There's, that was she wanted to act. I wrote a character for her. But in Light Attaching to a Girl, which is my feature, my family is just being versions of themselves. So that's important, which leads to the second thing I was going to say is write roles for the talent that you have. I like to work as local as possible. So for things we say, I have Morgana Eakins, who's a local actress who's excellent, Tony Naj, who's a filmmaker and an actress, and Gentry Jollymore, who had never acted before, but I knew she's a performer, she's a singer-songwriter, I knew she would be able to bring the stage presence and forget that the camera was there. But I know them as people. I know them as two of them as actresses. I knew what their strengths and weaknesses were. So we developed roles that were fitting for them, things that they could bring a lot from their personal experience. So Gentry, in a lot of ways, even though her character makes a whole bunch of mistakes that she would never make, she was playing a touring singer-songwriter. We wrote a lot of the actual things from her life into her role. So she was being herself in a lot of ways. So that helps, is again, like hedging your bets. You want good performances? Try to work with authentic material and authentic people.
This reminds me a little bit of that cooking show where it's like make dinner out of what you already have in your refrigerator.
Oh yeah,
instead of going out and buying new
Filmmaking
groceries.
in New Hampshire. That's what it is. Totally. And then as far as like attracting talent, not real. I don't mean the other ones aren't real, but names. I'm working on the film that I'm shooting in May is a SAG shoot. We have a budget. I'm working with a casting agent, but it's still tiny money. Unless you're talking real big money, these are people who could get better paying gigs. So the thing that you can offer them, which you had touched upon, was maybe the bigger paying gigs that they're doing are commercials that they hate. So, give them something of excellence. And that comes from having a couple of other films you can show them so they can see your creative vision. So that helps. If you're not a first time person, you can say, hey, I made these things. And then make a story that's going to, choose a story that's going to appeal to them. I'm casting when I was casting for this piece in May, the response, these actresses I was going to in New York, they could get much better paying things, but some of them hated it, but others of them were moved by the story. And that's what you want. Because when you're directing somebody, it's an incredibly vulnerable, intimate relationship that you enter into, because you need them to feel 100% safe to be vulnerable and possibly fail in front of you. And you need them to feel the same way about you, because who knows how you're going to do. So it's a very deep relationship that you enter into. And so if you can create that comfortability and have the warmth and have the presence when you're meeting your actors and actresses, they're going to want to work with you no matter how much it's paying, or no matter how many resources you have for distribution. So I think it's a combination of make your family do it, write for, the talent that's available, and then just offer a sincere, real experience for an actor and actress to connect with, to try to get somebody who's a bit larger.
This question is for you and also for you. So with the films that were scripted, your script was sort of non-existent, so this might not be a question that you can effectively answer on this particular project. But I'm curious, did the actors ever go off script, or was there a lot of back and forth? I would think with you, since you're writing the script for the actor, is there back and forth of, I want to change this, or this feels better for me?
Oh yeah, I from any script I write, I'm always very open with my actors that this isn't a play, this is not the Bible. You can make this your own. I encourage it because I find that if they make a line their own, they get more comfortable with it. And then I might steer them back towards the line if I feel like what I wrote packs a better punch or whatever it is, but especially in the rehearsal times and in getting comfortable, and oftentimes they'll come up with something that was even better. It's dialogue for me. The dialogue that I write is very fluid. It's about them understanding what I'm trying to say and helping get there.
And it's probably a little different for both the Beautifully Drowned and My Husband's Jump. the tone of the film. Like you said, it's almost like a period piece in some ways, so there's maybe less room there, but I don't know. Would you say there was much of that?
I've never thought about it, so I'm actually going, wow. I feel like in the moment working with the actor on the set, we're all we want to just see the performance that happens, but I think we stick pretty close to the scripts. And I think that's the product of how many different drafts as well. But these two genres require a slightly stylized language.
Yes, that's the word,
to build that
stylized.
dream.
Exactly.
And so that. And I think that helps actors in these two cases anyway, that they, having the stylized language actually was a way for them into the dream each time they were doing a scene.
Yes. Cool.
So I think that's very peculiar to a 1950s, magic realist story and a period piece where you're drowning people in the Bay of Fundy, throwing them off cliffs. Yeah. So.
Do you want to add anything to that?
Not really. Was there anything about the voiceover that stood out that way? Because that was something that we kind of did end up toying around with quite a bit.
So there was some language we pulled right from the story because she's a wonderful storyteller. Some we didn't because she's so quirky that it kicks you out of the story, and that was not good for this piece.
Right.
But in the closing montage, you see a montage of all the people who have been affected by this story, and there's a voiceover that we butchered in the end. I think we created a Frankenstein monster of the voiceover we wanted because we kept moving characters around looking for that emotional journey, because it is a sort of symphony at the end, and you're trying to create this emotional crescendo, and so the voiceover had to change from the story, change from what we'd recorded with the actress. The actress was in Los Angeles, and we managed to do one retake with her, one ADR session where she was in a closet in Los Angeles.
Oh, funny.
Recording, because she's a singer as well, so she had some good mics. But we ended up doing a Frankenstein monster piece, but that wasn't changing the words so much as their placement to create the emotional journey, I think. So I should let you speak to that.
No, it's okay. It's just one other interesting note to add is that there was one other line in the final voiceover. It was originally in the script. It was the last line of the film, but we decided to cut it because, as you said, there was. I think it might have been pulled from the original short story, but it became something that, as we had talked about with this film, that kicked us out of that story world, that story of wonder. It became almost ironic in a sense, and it just we found with it we were building it to this emotional crescendo, and then there was this one like small last line that was somehow like kept pulling us out of there. And then once we took it out, we found we were kind of on this emotional high that we wanted to achieve with that montage. And it's funny the impact even something as like a voiceover and like just a certain phrasing of specific words can change that entire mood of a film. So that was,
and to spend 15 minutes building hopefully wonder with people and then to pull the carpet on them just seemed really unkind.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah, it was good. You retained that so beautifully. That was one of the big achievements of that project, I feel like, from a viewer standpoint. I actually had a question for you, and your Craigslist or designer to order made me think of this.
Sure.
One of the things that worked in the film that I wouldn't have expected to was visually seeing the texts. Like, it wasn't just what the text said, but it was, as you were reading them, they had a visual impact beyond like literally what they said. And I was wondering if when you started that, was there a lot of like, oh, that doesn't look right. We want it to look different. And so then you would make changes.
I mean, yes, down to even the text messages themselves,
That's what I'm talking-
changed.
Yeah.
Like, so the text within the balloons changed. The look of each of the balloons was something that was changing through the process. Yeah, even after the premiere, so to speak, when we showed it to the cast at our house, like we changed the color contrast between the yellow text balloons of the male lead. So that was changed. But yeah, I mean, everything to the the tale of the text balloons and the reactions
Yeah.
that they have, that was all animated,
Yeah.
per, our direction. Like I was, working very closely with Caleb on those. Any of the
Stylistically, it really worked, though. Whatever
Thank
you
you.
arrived at, I feel like it was the right choice.
Yeah, the like the more jagged text balloons for people who are not actually there,
Yeah.
or may not be real, but we won't go there.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, Mark, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
No, that's interesting. It's something when you embark on making a film, it's probably not something that you're thinking of up front, but then you get in the editing room and you're like, oh, this is something else we have to consider.
I mean,
Yeah.
the balloons were something that we had kind of gone back and forth on, like the different types of text balloons,
Yeah.
and that really did turn the mood of the film so much. I mean, from just a standard white and black, text balloon to a yellow and white or blue and white or whatever the different colors. And I will actually add to that the sound effects that we added to the text balloons. It was very, very, very hard to follow this film without the sound accompanying
sure.
the text
Yeah.
balloons. And it gave a voice to each of the different characters.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that was something that we also created. These were not, pre-recorded
Cool.
text sounds. It was something that I worked with John Lindsay, our composer, to do and make it a part of the soundtrack, if you will, to the film.
That's so
So up until the very end, you don't really hear much score. It's
Yeah.
all just the sound effects.
That's interesting. At this point, I'd love to open it up to the audience if you guys have any questions for the filmmakers. Yeah.
I had a question in texture about the waiter, kind of the zaniness of the waiter. I was wondering, is that something the actor brought to the film, or is that something that?
That's a combination. There's a lot of it in the screenplay, but that actor, Paul, is just hilarious. And so we kind of let him go and said, do what you want, and then he'd go a little too far, and then we'd rein him in. So it was a mix, but the actor had a lot of great physical comedy in him. He could be a silent film actor. It was great.
Your question?
Well, not a question, I just want to make an observation about the improvisation that happened in Norwood when Pedro was talking to the chickens. And he asked, I guess, Lena, do you want to throw some of the Spanish in there?
Yeah, it was in the script to have Spanish, but I wasn't going to write something Spanish, so I just said, like, Pedro speaks to his ladies in Spanish or something like that,
When he shoos them?
Yeah, so
I
it's like,
love that
Marta, como
moment.
te lo he dicho,
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
a great moment.
What I'm saying
Yeah.
is, you better be good or I'll eat you.
That's great. It worked not knowing that, so now it takes it to another level.
I wanted to add just a quick follow-up to Mark's response to your question. One of the reasons that we really had Paul go as far as we did with that character is it's the world that everyone's missing, essentially. They don't give him the time of day in that table scene. They're just so fixated on their devices that he's having fun, if you will, at their expense, for himself, or is he even real? Again, we don't necessarily even know the answer to this. But it was definitely a Mr. Bean-ish type of performance, and that's what I had him look at for reference leading up to the shoot, to really encapsulate that physical comedy and just perform on the table as his stage, if you will. So he's always in that shot with each of them on the ends of the table, and he enters and exits, and it doesn't matter where he enters or exits from. It's just
Never anywhere else.
right.
Yeah.
I experienced that when I saw the film, because I, not too long ago, went into a party with very young folks there, and I was wearing this just silly shirt, and no one was speaking, and they were all texting, and I realized they were all texting to each other, and I laughed, because I thought, oh, they're making a joke, and they were serious, and nobody noticed me, and I thought, I feel like that waiter.
I think we got the year wrong on our
I know, it's-
title card.
2020.
Yeah, it's coming fast. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. It's been great having you guys. This was a ton of fun. congratulations on making really excellent films, and I hope that you guys will be back next year
Thank you.
with something else. We're going to go for 3 for 3 with you. So, do you,
Hopefully.
oh, actually, well, just very quickly, is anybody pressed for time? Does anyone want to hear very quickly what everybody else has going next? Because I think people are curious to hear that. What's next on the docket?
June 1st, we go to camera on our first feature film, which John is producing, he looks probably a little more tired than me right now. And I'm directing, and I wrote, so.
You wrote it, okay.
Yeah,
And
so
give us the elevator speech. What's
It's
it about?
called Entropic. I can't pitch it with my life, but if you go to Indiegogo Entropic, it's there for the crowdfunding campaign for the next month. Also, if you go to frictivepictures.com, there's actually a pitch video for it, so it does a much better job than I do on the spot, unfortunately, so.
We try to keep ourselves pretty busy. So along with producing Entropic, we're also my next short film, currently titled The Wonderful Future, I have received funding for. We've been talking about possibly going to camera with it in October, but I feel like shooting a feature film in June and then shooting a short film in October is, even for us, maybe a bit ambitious. So we'll see. If not October, then next spring for sure.
Great, you're-
So I've got the B movie on Saturday, which is going to festivals currently. I just got back from London a couple
great.
weeks ago.
Go see it.
Thank you. I have Things We Say, which is another short film that's going to festivals right now. I have a feature film, Light Attaching to a Girl, that has been filmed half in Iceland and half in Keene, New Hampshire. I'm just trying to raise the rest of the money to finish the darn thing, but just the editor and the composer. But otherwise, it's there. And then in May, I'm going on set for another short film called Somewhere in July.
Great.
I'm writing a horror comedy short. Eric's turning Texture into a feature on a screenplay, and then we're going to bring Texture to Amazon soon. So.
Awesome. Okay, I'm glad I asked. Well, thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.